Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. What do you know about the country of Turkey? Constantinople, Istanbul, Turkey. Did you know Turkey is going nuclear? A fellow by the name of Britt Gillette, writing for ProphecyNewsWatch.com, tells us that during the 17 years that he has ruled NATO member Turkey, the country's Islamic strongman, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has rarely missed an opportunity stealthily to convert Mustafa Kemal Ataturk's secular pro-Western establishment into a rogue state hostile to Western interests. Erdogan now wants to make it a rogue state with nuclear weapons. In a September 4th speech, he said, "They say we can't have nuclear-tipped missiles, though some have them. Well, this I cannot accept." He's rejecting calls to prevent his country from acquiring nuclear weapons while conveniently forgetting that Turkey has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1980. In other words, Turkey's elected leader publicly declares that he intends to breach an international treaty signed by his country so that he can have nuclear weapons. Turkey is also a signatory to the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which bans all nuclear detonations for any purpose. This is not the first time that Erdogan has voiced an eagerness to make Turkey a nuclear-armed state. As early as 2008, when he was the poster child of naive Western statesmen and intellectuals who believed he was a reformist Democrat. He said, quote, "Countries that oppose Iran's nuclear weapons should not have nuclear weapons themselves." Now, despite the use of the plural countries, Erdogan was apparently pointing his finger at the country he hates the most, and that's Israel. In a 2010 speech, Erdogan described Israel as the principal threat to peace in the Middle East. In that speech, he repeated his skepticism about whether Iran intended to use its nuclear fuel program to build nuclear weapons and said there was no such uncertainty concerning Israel's undeclared arsenal. So what's at stake? If Turkey overtly or covertly launched a nuclear weapons program, as Erdogan apparently wishes to do, that move could well have a domino effect on the region. Turkey's regional adversaries would be alarmed, and Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, Greece, all might be tempted to launch their own nuclear weapons programs. Would Israel stand for a nuclear Turkey any more so than a nuclear Iran? Erdogan's threats to Israel have been more subtle than Iran's threats to wipe Israel off the map, but they are just as dangerous. In July, Turkey announced its plans to move forward with the purchase of a Russian S-400 air defense system. In response, the U.S. expelled Turkey from the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program, canceling their previous order of 100 F-35s. Furthermore, Turkey's announcement opened the door for more penalties under the 2017 act that calls for sanctions on any nation that buys a major defense article from Russia. Currently, relations remain strained as the two nations work to find a solution, but far from an isolated incident, it's just the latest dispute between the United States and Turkey. The relationship between these two countries has been volatile for several years now, but this wasn't always the case. Up until a few years ago, Turkey was a reliable ally for the U.S., Israel, and NATO. The history of Turkey goes back to the Ottoman Empire. But following World War I and the breakup of that Ottoman Empire, an empire that Mustafa Kemal Ataturk led, there came a Turkish independence. When the war ended, the victors established the Republic of Turkey. That was 1923. Ataturk served as the new nation's first president. He oversaw numerous reforms to modernize Turkey. He established a secular Western democracy and made the nation a model democratic republic in the Middle East. In 1949, Turkey became the first Muslim-majority nation to recognize Israel. In 1952, it joined NATO. For the latter part of the 20th century, Turkey was a strong ally of Israel, the U.S., and other Western nations. But as the 21st century dawned, Turkey explored membership in the European Union. This would have further solidified the nation's Western ties. But instead, an event took place that reshaped the future of Turkey. In 2003, Turkey elected Recep Tayyip Erdogan Prime Minister. He was a former member of a banned Islamist political party. Erdogan's administration has been hostile toward Turkey's secular and democratic institutions. Under Erdogan, Turkey has turned from its traditional Western allies and cultivated relationships with nations that oppose Western democracy. In July 2016, Erdogan cracked down on his political opponents following what he claimed was a coup attempt. He imprisoned thousands of citizens, consolidated his grip on power. In 2017, a referendum further extended that power. Now the president, Erdogan, is the undisputed ruler of Turkey. The nation once hailed as a model of freedom and democracy in the Muslim world has quickly devolved into a totalitarian regime, eager to befriend America's enemies. So why should we care? Well, aside from diminishing freedom and liberty for Turkish citizens, these events have enormous prophetic significance. Why? Well, because Turkey is a key member of the Magog alliance in the Bible. 6 centuries before the crucifixion of Christ, Ezekiel foretold a future invasion of Israel. Chapters 38 and 39. He said it will occur in the last days. Chapter 38, verse 16. It will come from the north of Israel. 38:15. Ezekiel 39, verse 2. And it will involve a coalition of nations led by Russia. Ezekiel 38:2. The nations Ezekiel cited include Russia, Magog, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Persia, which we now call Iran, Kush, Sudan, Put, Libya, Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Beth Togarmah, that's Turkey. For years, those who study Bible prophecy have wondered how Turkey fits into this alliance. After all, Turkey is a longtime ally of Israel, also a member of NATO, and the idea of Turkey joining a Russian invasion of Israel is just very hard to imagine. In 2014, I noted in my book, Signs of the Second Coming, this author says that Turkey is an interesting member of this military alliance for another reason. Since the restoration of Israel in 1948, those who understand Bible prophecy have struggled to figure out how Turkey fits in, because in 1949, Turkey became the first Muslim country to officially recognize the State of Israel. And Turkey and Israel have a long history of diplomatic, economic, military cooperation. So why would Turkey join a Russian alliance to invade another country? Well, it didn't make much sense for many, many years. But the idea is not so far-fetched today. In May 2010, Turkey and Russia signed a series of agreements enhancing their energy ties, including an agreement to build Turkey's first nuclear power plant. In recent years, Turkey's domestic politics, historically secular in nature, have been heavily influenced by Islam. And that gives Turkey more than enough motive to join the Gog of Magog alliance. So here we are. Erdogan has consolidated power in Turkey. Ataturk's Turkish Republic is dead. The relationship between Vladimir Putin and Erdogan is strong and growing. And all that's left to permanently move Turkey into Russia's sphere of influence is a clear breakdown between Turkey and NATO. Well, while we wait for that moment, the military forces of the three most powerful members of the Gog of Magog alliance, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, are now cooperating in Syria. Just this week, Turkish President Erdogan hosted the leaders of Russia and Iran in Ankara for talks relative to resolving the Syrian civil war. It's expected any final agreement between these nations will put their joint military forces right on Israel's border. And not just any border, Israel's northern border. And this is where Ezekiel said the invasion force would come, from the north of Israel. Ezekiel 38:15 and 39 verse 2. None of this is mere coincidence. Never in history have these three nations formed an alliance. Now they're stationed directly to Israel's north. The stage is now set for the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38:39 prophecies. Turkey has made a strategic choice to align itself with Russia and Iran. Eventually, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and other nations of the Gog-Magog alliance will send an overwhelming invasion force against Israel. When they do, God will destroy them, and thus display his power and glory for all the nations to see. Ezekiel 38, verse 23. All of this is just one more sign as to how close we are to the second coming of Jesus. Are you ready for that?